Now that we've seen our e-commerce sales data, it's time to create our Logstash pipeline to integrate and transform them. In this video, we'll build our Logstash configuration file step by step. I'll explain each section, each parameter, so you understand exactly what's happening. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete and functional Logstash pipeline. Let's begin. So, to create a Logstash configuration file, we'll go to the config folder of Logstash. When I go to the installation folder, in the config folder, I'll create a new file. So, feel free. I'll create a new file that I'll call Logstash e-commerce. And I'll name it, and I'll put the extension as conf. Conf is a convention we use for configuration files. So, Logstash e-commerce conf. There, I'm creating that file. And I'll open it. A Logstash configuration file is presented in 3 stages. You have an input section. Then you have a filter section. And after that, you have an output section. Like this. The input defines the data source, files, databases, APIs, and so on. In our case, in the input, we'll specify the CSV file. The filter transforms and enriches with parsing, conversions, calculations. That's where the magic happens. It's in the filter, and the output gives the final destination of the data. In our case, it's Elasticsearch. We'll send the data to Elasticsearch. Let me invite you into the folder there. Inside the folder, you have Logstash. Go into the Logstash folder. We're going to create a folder called Samples. You create a folder, we'll call it Samples, and that's where we'll put the CSV files we want to process. In the resources for this video, you'll find the CSV files attached. So you'll copy them and put them in this Samples folder. I'll do it. I'd already downloaded the files. So I copy them for you. You download them from the resources and put them in the Samples folder. So here we are. This is the source of our data. It's the folder where we have the files we want to process. Notice that all the files start with sales underscore. So there's a pattern. Here are the files we want to process. Dead. Now go back to your input configuration file. In the config file we just created here, log-v-commerce, conf. We'll start configuring the input. So you see here, the input is empty. And I'll add this. So the input is empty. So there you go. I'll add this section here. Don't worry, you have the complete configuration, which will also be attached to the resources for this video. So here, the idea here with file is to say that the input we're choosing is files. Because Logstash supports multiple inputs. It can be a database. It can be an API. It can be a port it listens on. So here, since we're processing files, in the input we specify that it's a file. The path parameter allows us to specify the path where the files we want to process are located. Remember, we just created the samples folder here. So we'll take the path. So here's the path where the files we want to process are located. So in my case, here's the path. Okay, I remove this like that. In my case, here's the path where the files I want to process are located. It's in the samples folder. And here, if you're processing a single file, you can directly specify the name of the file you're processing. But in my case, I'm processing multiple files, so we can use the wildcard. Here, it means that all files starting with sales. I'll take them. And to make it simple, I can just say, in the samples folder. Process all the files inside. Because all the files we'll put in the samples folder for this project are e-commerce sales CSV files. These are files we want to process. So you get it? The path parameter allows you to specify to Logstash where your files are located, where you'll deposit files day by day. That's the importance of the path parameter. You're telling it where Logstash can go fetch your files. And rest assured, it's not just about processing once with Logstash. If Logstash is running and tomorrow you come back to deposit files in the same folder, it will process them. So that's the role of the path parameter. Next, you have the start position parameter, which allows you to specify how you'll read the files. We say here beginning to tell Logstash to start reading the file from the beginning, from the first line. But we can specify end if we wanted Logstash to read the file from the end. So it's up to us to specify to Logstash how we want it to read the file. Does it start from the first line or does it start from the last line? Generally, we use end to tell Logstash to start from the last line when it's a file that's supposed to grow. So here, we'll leave it as beginning, and then, still in the input, you have the since_db path parameter. When Logstash processes files, it keeps information in memory and in a file in memory. It keeps track of the files it has processed, like a pointer. Here, generally, we provide a path. The path to the file where Logstash will keep the history of files it has already processed. This allows it, in production, not to reprocess the same files multiple times. But here, since we're in a test environment, we can leave the since_db as null and not specify it. We can keep that value. But otherwise, in production, we'll just provide a path to a file, and in that file, Logstash will keep the history of files it has already processed. So it's pretty straightforward. Here's how our input is configured. Since we're dealing with files, we've specified the parameters so Logstash can go fetch the files we want to process. When we specify the path with Logstash, here's how we use the slash. Not a backslash, just a regular slash, like this. Now, the Logstash filter is the section where we handle all the transformations. So we'll go step by step. The first transformation we'll do is to make Logstash understand that we're processing CSV files. Fine. So if I open a sample CSV file here, we have this. Let me open an example here. We can see that the separator in this CSV is a comma. So right here, we tell Logstash that the separator is a comma. I'll specify the columns for it. That way, when Logstash reads my files, it'll be able to recognize them. So I provide the columns here just as they are. I give Logstash the columns for my CSV files. And one last parameter here, skip header, is to tell Logstash that the files you're processing have a header row. So the first line of these files isn't data. It's just the header. There you go. So here, I told Logstash that skip header is true.
Like yeah.
This CSV filter here lets Logstash know we're processing CSV files and formats them correctly. Next, we have a date field here. I want to convert it to date format and rename it so it doesn't show up as date, but instead with another field name. So still in my filter, I'll add this block. This block is to specify that I want to format the date in this way. At first, it's just a string like it was before. It's just a string. But with this date filter, it lets us say that this string isn't just a string, but it's actually a date. And here's the format. There are 4 digits. First, indicating the year. Then 2 digits indicating the month. And after that, a hyphen and 2 digits indicating the day. So here, it converts this date field I have in my file. It converts it to date format. Now, I tell it to put the result in a new field called timestamp. In Logstash, I also have the ability to do conversions. What I'll do here in this next block is convert all my numeric fields. I have fields here in my file like quantity, the ordered quantity, the unit price, the total order price. I'll set them as integers. So for quantity, I set it as an integer. The unit price, a price can be a float. It can be a decimal number, so I set it as a float. The total price also I set as a float. It can be a floating point number. And here, you should know that there are fields that Logstash adds by default to your data. So here, I want to remove them. So I use remove field to get rid of fields like message, host, path. Actually, there are others too. There are other fields as well, like a version. There are also fields that Logstash adds, like events as well. So I want to remove them, and I do remove them. All right, good. So with that, you now have a filter that's ready. First, we recognize the CSV by specifying the columns and everything. It parses our CSV correctly. And there's a date field that we format and rename. Then we did some conversions and removed some fields. But you know. So we just have the last part left. When is it? It's to specify the destination. So here, Logstash knows where to go to fetch the files. And automatically, it will go and fetch them. And each time we drop a new file in this folder, Logstash will pick it up and process it automatically. Logstash knows how to do that. Okay? It knows the transformations it needs to perform on the file. There are plenty of others. There are many other Logstash filters for doing transformations. You can just go to the website and check the documentation to see the different possible filters and implement them according to the cleaning and transformation you want to do on your files. But there's one last thing left to specify to Logstash. After all these transformations, where do you send the final data? In our case, we want to send the data to Elasticsearch. So I'll briefly show the configuration needed to send the data to Elasticsearch. So here, we come back to the Elasticsearch output. So here, I set the Elasticsearch output. Host. Here, you need to specify the address of our Elasticsearch cluster. There, I've specified mine and the index, the name of the index that will be created. It's like in SQL, the name of the table that will contain the data. In Elasticsearch, under what index name do we want the data we send to be stored? I said, okay, we'll call it e-commerce sales. That'll be the name. Here, you need to enter the user for your Elasticsearch cluster and the password for your Elasticsearch cluster. So when you installed Elasticsearch earlier, you got this user and this password. You must enter it here. Here, I set SSL to true because, as you can see, my Elasticsearch cluster is on HTTPS. If it's HTTP, you can set it to false. However, for SSL verification mode, since I'm in test mode, I'll set it to none. This is to avoid having to specify the path to the Elastic certificate. Otherwise, you'll set it to full and specify the path where your certificate is located to connect to Elasticsearch. In production, that's what you should do. You'll set it to full and use another parameter, cast_cert_path, where you'll specify the path to the Elastic certificate. But here, we'll just set it to none and run the test.